Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome back to the American Center in Moscow. I'm joined today with Sally Roberts, CEO of Wrestle Like, a former elite athlete dedicated to advancing women's wrestling and strengthening opportunities for the next generation. As the CEO of Wrestle Like a Girl, Sally has played a pivotal role in securing NCAA Championship status for women's wrestling, ensuring that female athletes have the same avenues for success at the highest levels. Sally is also a three-time national champion, a World Cup champion, two-time world bronze medalist, and a U.S. Olympic alternate. She's participated in the Army's world-class elite athlete program, and she's joining us today to discuss the evolution of women's wrestling in America, the power of wrestling to bridge cultural differences, and the work of her nonprofit, Wrestle Like a Girl. Sally, welcome to the American Center in Moscow.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you all.
So, Sally, tell us a bit about what you're up to right now. Tell us a bit about your organization and any projects that you're working on this summer.
Wrestle Like a Girl. We are the global advocacy organization for girls and women in the sport of wrestling. We are looking at multiple ways to reduce the barriers to entry and increase access and opportunities for girls and women who wrestle. In the United States, we are focusing on getting 2 more states to recognize girls' high school wrestling as a championship sport. We're working to see more female coaches get involved in the sport across the globe, and we're working to increase our participation numbers. We want to see every girl and woman in the world wrestle the Olympic style of wrestling if they choose to, and we want to be at the forefront of ensuring that they have access to those opportunities.
So your focus is on girls, on youth. Could you talk about your early experiences in youth sports and how did wrestling come about?
My early experiences were really born of the battle. I had a really troubled childhood. I didn't like being at home after school. So I would go out and find things to get in trouble with. I was getting into fights and being otherwise a bit rambunctious. So when I was presented with an opportunity to participate in the sport of wrestling, and that was after school, I recognized that it gave me a pathway. Really staying out of trouble is what I thought at the time. But as I look back, it was a pathway of financial, social, and educational mobility. So I started wrestling, and because wrestling was paired with education, I was able to go through all the way through junior high, all the way through high school, participating in the sport of wrestling. And I have also been to Moscow. I've been to Russia, and I've been able to see the incredible wrestling facilities and been able to see the wrestling that happens there. I've been so fortunate to be able to compete in Russia and to be able to go there and coach as well to some of the different institutions that have women's wrestling. It's a very competitive sport. It's offered across the globe. I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to participate, and I'm grateful that we're going to continue this conversation.
Sure. So for some newbies to the sport, like myself, could you maybe describe some of the fundamental points to how wrestling competitions work, what avenues there are for elite competition?
Yes. So wrestling, the Olympic style of wrestling, it's all about control. And one of the things that I think makes wrestling so beautiful is that it forces you as an athlete to control your space, your voice, your body. You have to be in control of yourself so that you can try and control and dominate your opponent. And it's really about freestyle wrestling is about exposing your opponent's back past that 90-degree angle and scoring points. You can win in one of 2 ways. One, you can get more points than them. Or 2, you would pin them, and that's putting their shoulders instantaneously to the back of the mat. And that's called a pin. And so it's about controlling and dominating your opponent. You expose and get points by exposing their back past 90-degree angles. And whoever gets the most points at the end of the match, or whoever gets the pin, they'll be the winner.
Sounds extremely tactical, much more, maybe just as much tactical as physical.
It is. It's very much like a chess match. In fact, if you look at where do wrestlers move on to once they've completed and finished out their wrestling season, their wrestling career, whether it's through the high school, collegiate, or post-collegiate channels, they're going into spaces where they're lawyers. They're going into spaces where they're doctors, um, uh, legislators, in combination with the physicality of it, where you really start to control yourself, and that opens up that pathway of leadership that is afforded and it has been afforded to boys and men across the globe through a myriad of ways. And now it is open to girls and women, where they're going to be learning those same skills, talents, and attributes that our men get to learn, because like our men, they are involved in the sport of chosen suffering to understand how to suffer well, and make something of it.
Well, I love that. Sport of chosen suffering. Um, well, you were a trailblazer for women's wrestling in the U.S., and you offer coaching to young girls. But how did you develop your skills as one of the first? Who helped you find your who helped you learn to control your space?
I have been fortunate to have been coached by incredible, incredible leaders. I think that you either find sport or sport finds you, but we're really lucky when the youth of the world are able to participate in sport, because it teaches you that really fascinating physiological control of your body. Like, you want to be angry, you want to have these outbursts, but you can't, because that's excess energy that's unhelpful if it's not being directed wisely. That's that same thing that we learn in sport. We learn that in business. We learn that in academia. Excuse me. We learn that in politics. And so being able to control that space, that comes from not just you, but it comes from watching your opponents. It comes from watching your teammates. You're going to be able to see what you like. You're going to be able to see what you don't like. You bring all that information back to yourself, to your inner self, and say, how do I want to incorporate any of those elements? You learn the facets of sovereignty and agency, through the coach that you have, through the teammates that you have, through the community that you live in. Everything we do, talk about, speak, say, that builds into who we are as a human being, who we are as an athlete, and we fold that in together on a regular basis, and that becomes the character and the patterns that we walk with. It's always been important for me as an athlete to walk with courage, character, and confidence. Those three things, if I could do those three things every day in the wrestling room, then I would call that success. But if I could do those three things every day outside of the wrestling room, then made it happen in the wrestling room, it was so much easier. And I truly became a leader that, because of sport, has been able to walk the walk and talk the talk with such a level of competence that has led to confidence. It has been really a breakthrough. And it is one of the breakthroughs that athletes get by choosing to participate in a sport that is incredibly challenging, that again invokes suffering, because you get to determine on a regular basis how do you want to handle that, regardless of all the circumstances occurring around you.
That's really insightful, and the confidence is clear, just from all the work that you've been able to do through your foundation, all the leadership that you've done for the sport, and even in speaking engagements that you've had in the past. I met you at an event where you were talking about just this, that leadership that you developed and develop in people through wrestling. I'm curious then, how did you develop that confidence from an early point? It sounds like you mentioned a troubled childhood. Things weren't quite going right for you as a kid until wrestling came into the picture. How did you start developing that confidence from just that little seed?
Confidence is a gift, and you gain confidence with competence, which means you have to take a bet on yourself. And you have to say, in order for me to be able to start to gain confidence in this, I have to get competent in it. And in order to get competent, I have to try. But if I'm going to try, I have to give myself grace because I know I'm going to fail. It is improbable that I'm going to do this absolutely correct the first time out of the gates. So what do I have to show up with? Compassion for myself and say, girl, you are going to try and you are going to try and you're going to try. And if you're going to get it right, that's great. But if not, you're going to get up and you're going to keep trying and you're going to keep trying. And it is that positive self-talk that we give to ourselves in the face of adversity, that we give to ourselves in the face of triumph, tragedy, joy, exaltation. It is that inner voice that is going to speak to us and drive us to the direction that we are going to be going in the future. We're the ones that get to dictate our pathway. We are the ones that get to dictate the direction that we go. And it is the thoughts that we think and the words that we speak that get us to go in that direction.
Words to live by. Try. So what do you remember then in your process of trying to win, trying to get to the top? What do you remember of competing abroad and representing your country?
The ability to be an athlete that traveled international was life-changing. To be able to intermix with different cultures, to taste different spices, to understand different wake-up hours and different sleeping hours, the different cultural dances that people do across the globe. It really started to give me some seasoning and some zest for life and the possibilities that previously I didn't have any exposure to. For instance, the first time that I was in Russia, they said, "Do you want to go to a Russian sauna?" I said, "I would love to." And when I was sitting down, I had to ask the question, why is someone hitting me with sticks? I didn't know that I had asked for this. And it was through really being able to get those opportunities, explore them, sit through them, be curious, lean in. That was the beauty of living and traveling with sport across the globe.
That's great. I don't think I would have expected the sticks either. Wonder if they knew they were using the sticks on a professional wrestler. That might have been a little more frightening for them. So, what are some? Is there one particular competition that stands out to you? Something that really you look back on as a particular success, or something that is a particular point for learning?
Yes. One of the really important things that I learned, certainly we can look at our wins and see some beautiful things, but it really came from my losses. It came from the things that I didn't do right, where I had to take that information back and say, am I going to let this eat me alive, or am I going to learn from it? And it was that level of self-control that I think helped me really create the framework of my life and how did I want to move forward.
Learning from your losses. I think that's something Billie Jean King has spoken about too. Learning from your losses and moving on from those. So with competing in Russia, I would love to just stick on this point for a little bit because of our audience in Moscow. Could you share a bit about maybe some of the stylistic differences in how those athletes competed? Is there anything that sticks out in terms of how maybe they were trained in different ways, the ways they carried themselves?
Yes, but I'm going to, for just a moment, I need to adjust my screen.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for your grace.
No worries.
All right. I apologize for that. I am sweating a little bit.
Oh, no worries.
Thank you. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about what it was like wrestling in Russia, and also very specifically in Moscow. First, I came to understand the importance of the significance of the sport of wrestling in Russia. I competed at this incredible tournament called the Ivan Urigin, and it was in Krasnoyarsk, Russia. So you land in Moscow, take a plane another 8 hours east. You land in Krasnoyarsk on this the the airplane field. It's outside, so you're landing on ice, and it's snowy. It's the middle of winter. It was negative 40 degrees, and when we stepped outside of the airplane, the first thing that hit me was this tremendous cold, and my eyelashes instantaneously got crystallized. I understood why people would stand next to each other talking, because when you were breathing out, your breath instantaneously went to ice. The conditions there were so challenging, and when we went to go pick up our luggage, one of the things that became clear was that the Team USA, our luggage hadn't arrived, and we weren't sure what had happened, and we didn't know where it went. So we were outside waiting, and as we were outside waiting, one of my teammates clapped her hands together and with delight said, "I am so excited this is happening, because now we know that when we win, we are the best." And our Russian counterparts heard that and said, "What are you talking about, you crazy Americans?" And that was the beginning of sport diplomacy, of understanding how do you use these hard conditions, where things don't go your way, your luggage doesn't get there on time, it's negative 40 degrees, you don't know what you're going to wear, the luggage carousel's outside, and it's hardship after hardship. And by the time that we got to our hotel, we had to get ready and compete. Our teammates, we were excited about it, but what we realized was that in Russia, that was just another day. Like, hardship is another day, and chosen suffering, that's another day. And when we went into the wrestling room, they didn't take it easy on us, the Russians. They did not take it easy on us because we got in late. They didn't take it easy on us because it was cold. They didn't take it easy on us because we didn't have our luggage, or that things weren't working out, or that our food didn't come. In fact, it was almost like working out to their advantage. Like, how much hardship could they throw at us? And as this tournament went on over the course of the next couple days, it became clear. The fans came out in droves. It was negative 40 degrees, and they were walking outside while eating ice cream, going to the stadium so that they could go and watch wrestling. This was something that the entire community came out for. And when I started to understand that was the level of love that the Russian people had for the great sport of wrestling, it really helped me understand in a different way how sport could be leveraged in positive ways for diplomatic means. And in that competition, that tournament, there was tremendous conversations that opened up between the United States and Russia, about different ways that we can work together, about different ways that we can collaborate. And even now, understanding the role that I have with Wrestle Like a Girl, there's phenomenal female wrestlers that continue to come out of Russia time and time again. And there's various parts of the nation, of the country, where wrestling is the chosen sport, and wrestling also bleeds into going in the direction of mixed martial arts and the UFC. So we're seeing what's happening with sports and with diplomacy. It is really starting to take off in a way that people around the globe are able to harness their power and recognize its potential.
That's fantastic. Just that chosen suffering, like you said, that brings people together in such a big way, even in harsh conditions. I do want to come back to what you've been talking about with sports diplomacy in a bit, because I know you've traveled extensively coaching people across the world through that lens. But before we do that, I want to ask you how you knew maybe it was time to start the next chapter after you finished competing, and what ended up sparking Wrestle Like a Girl?
I knew I knew that there was something else that I wanted to do. For me, I've based my book of life off of chapters, and each chapter is about 10 years. So the first 10 years, I had one job, a career. The next 10 years, I had a different career. My next career, I did something different. And so the question for me is the work that I'm doing exciting? Is it meaningful? Does it make me, when I wake up in the morning, do I find a motivation to what it is that I'm doing? Am I serving a greater good? Am I being a player in the game of life? Am I being a global citizen? Am I being a steward of the planet? And I really make a list over what kind of citizen do I want to be? And is the role that I'm working in reflective of that larger picture? Am I walking the walk and talking the talk? And I realized that for wrestling, there was other things that I wanted to do. Sport can be, it's a beautiful opportunity to do something great, but there's also life beyond sport that involves communities, that involves people in ways that, as a single sport athlete, you may not always have access to. And so I made the decision, I made the leap that I was going to found Wrestle Like a Girl because I recognized that I could sit around and complain about some of the shortcomings and some of the ways in which athletes in the United States and Moscow and across the globe are disenfranchised. They're without voice. They're without opportunity. And I could point and say, you should do it differently. You should do it differently. You should do it differently. Or I could say, I'm a leader and I'm going to choose to do it differently. So I look at my life through this lens of courageous leaps, and I look at what does the world need and how do I want to play a role, and what level of strength do I want to play that role in. And when I finally have come to a conclusion after enough time with myself, then I do make that courageous leap. I founded Wrestle Like a Girl simply because there was an opportunity. Like there was something missing in the landscape, and I could sit and complain about all the people that had failed and who weren't doing it, or I could decide to do it myself. And in that case, I did.
Walking the walk, sort of getting going out and finding a fight to get into.
That's right.
So one of your crowning achievements for Wrestle Like a Girl has been to get women's wrestling recognized as an NCAA championship sport. And participation in women's wrestling, it's surged from 17,000 athletes in 2016 to around 80,000 in 2025. That's just a huge increase. I'm sure that pattern has continued in 2026. Could you describe what's driving that growth?
I believe that we are simply wind at the backs of angels. The athletes are saying quite clearly they want to wrestle. They are saying quite clearly that they want the opportunity to participate in sport. And they are saying quite clearly that this is something that they're passionate about. And what we've been able to do at Wrestle Like a Girl is open up those doors of opportunity and present those options to the athletes for them to decide if they would like to do it. They can choose to. And for women's wrestling, there's now wrestling at the high school level in 47 different states. There's now women's wrestling at the NCAA level, and that's important for financial, social, education, mobility. And there's more opportunities to wrestle internationally. If you can afford the economics, pass your English proficiency exam, and get accepted into an institution in the United States to wrestle, you can come here, wrestle, and then go back to your home country with a degree, but also with that wrestling in your background. So there is opportunities to excel and to do things, but it all had to be thought out. It had to be put together because it wasn't fair or reasonable to ask our younger generations to do this incredible, like this heavy lifting work. It came to the adults that needed to do that for them. And they really just needed a champion. Just like in the many times where there's a need, you see things, you see people that need help, and you get to decide, am I not a leader, and can I not be a champion for this cause?
Mm-hmm. So what was the actual step-by-step process of getting the sport to be an NCAA championship sport? I'm sure there was a lot of bureaucracy. But what did it look like, big picture?
It was a true gift to my personal and professional development. We had to work as a collective to be able to bring women's wrestling into the NCAA. It was a roadmap, and there was a series of hurdles that we had to overcome. There was some deadlines that we had to meet. There was some parameters that we had to exist within, and we had to figure out, how do we as a sport work together to bring this to fruition in a way that is deserving of our athletes. And that was a really beautiful experience in diplomacy on what is the way that we bring together so many different visions and we bring it into a unified goal. For that particular effort, I was one of the leaders, and I felt that I needed to really increase my leadership ability through language, through how I communicate, so that I could make sure that I was communicating in a way that spoke of alignment. And I certainly failed more than I succeeded, but it was that effort, it was that pursuit of putting myself in a leadership position and needing to collaborate with others to get to an end result that was where we all wanted to be. Much like how we do sport and sport diplomacy. We know where we want to get to. We know that we have to get there. We need to get there as a team. And how do we get everyone on the same team?
Absolutely. I love the way you phrased it, making the sport something deserving of your athletes, not just getting it out there to get it out there, but something that is worthy of their chosen suffering. Coming back to that.
Yes. Yes.
Now, of those athletes, I don't know, maybe there's one or two that you have a story you could share, maybe somebody, or maybe not even in the college level, but somebody you've coached that really stands out to you.
Well, one of the individuals that I'm thinking of that stands out to me is this little gal that we met. She was 5 years old when we just started doing our work. And her mother would bring her regularly to camps and clinics. She would attend. She had this incredible zest for life that was really quite beautiful and normal in my eyes for how I would see girls and women, but perhaps atypical for how society would view a young girl. She certainly wasn't sugar, spice, and everything nice. She was a bit more aggressive and a bit more rambunctious, if you will. And through having found herself a safe place in the wrestling mat, she was able to really get her energy out in ways that created a stronger sense of self within her. So what's been beautiful for me to watch is that she is now graduating high school. She's wrestled all the way through junior high. She's wrestled all the way through high school. She's getting ready to move to Colorado, take up residency at the United States Olympic Training Center, and is going to be able to continue to see what life can unfold for her. And this was a girl that really started off in a fairly rugged way and is through sport finding hope. And I think every story that I can draw upon of the athletes that have really touched my life, it has been the athletes who found hope and salvation through sport. There was a female wrestler from Senegal. She was an orphan at a very young age. She got adopted by a family. It was abusive. She escaped, got freedom, got put into what would be called perhaps an orphanage. And while she was there, she got afforded the ability to start wrestling. And it was a sport that allowed her to really let her physicality show It allowed her to have that physiological expression, to be able to get energy and anger out of her system. And she went to a world championships, performed really well. And when she came back to the village, they gave her a chicken and they named her a princess. And it's these little stories of triumph over circumstances that speak out and really hold me and what drive me on a regular basis, because that's the human condition. That is the human spirit. It is, Joshua, as we say, chosen suffering, but it's for that greater good, because we want to be able to live a life that has meaning and merit and value. And that happens because we're living on our own free will, making these cognizant decisions of how do we want to think and how do we want to operate and what kind of teammates do we want to be in this game of life.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Sally. You raised an Olympian and raising a princess. So just among others, I'm sure, but very impressive.
That's right.
Yeah. So on the topic of diplomacy, we've sort of been on, we've mentioned it in a few places, but what is it about wrestling that allows you not only to make connections in Russia or in the US, but in places where you've been a sports envoy, like Jordan, for example?
Good question. The sport of wrestling, it's tied very much to the military as a military craft. And so every sport that has a strong military has a wrestling program in some way, shape, or form. It seems to be intertwined. And because of the masculinity of it, it's been a sport within the Olympic Games for over 100 years for the men. And that history means something, that legacy means something. And when we started to approach the conversation of women's wrestling across the globe, it piqued interest because it allowed us to have a conversation revolving equal access, equal opportunity, the empowerment of women from a position of strength, and where women were able to come in and support, lean in, and help other women through understanding how to control their strength. So being able to really stand across that divide between sports and diplomacy, and why wrestling, because wrestling is one of the most important sports diplomatically in terms of leadership development. When I was in Azerbaijan, I was with one of the wrestling coaches, John Smith, and he's a tremendously successful, multiple-time world champion, Olympic champion. And as we were getting ready to go around the country, he would say, "Oh, the person that is the minister of sport in this region where we're going to, I wrestled them at the world championships. By the way, they're Russian." And he would say, "Oh, the person that we're going to visit at this region is this minister of sport, and I wrestled him at the world championships. Oh, and by the way, he's Russian." And so just the idea of how important sport has been, how important wrestling has been across Europe, Asia, Eastern Europe, it cannot be understated. And the people that have participated in the sport of wrestling have all gone on to become leaders, whether it's in their family, their community, leading institutions, governments, communities. Like, they're leaders. That is what wrestling teaches, and that is what wrestling demands, is that you become a leader of yourself, and with the grace of good fortune, you will also lead others with kindness, humility, and compassion.
That's great insight about the interconnectedness of the wrestling landscape, Sally. I appreciate you sharing that about all those ties. It feels like the U.S. is almost catching up in a way to the use of sports and diplomacy. Just that sort of leveraging those relationships that athletes can build for building something better. Now, you raised an interesting and I think really relevant points earlier, in that diplomacy for women, as focusing on the women's side of sport on diplomacy, has just historically lagged behind, perhaps on compared to, say, men's wrestling, diplomacy centered on men. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you may have had translating your lived experience into these spheres that have been dominated by male voices?
Yes. When I was in the Middle East, I was with a translator, and we went through an entire practice, and I asked the translator, I'd like to talk to these athletes and help them with the sport diplomacy, sport and performance psychology. So what we need is for them to lay on their backs. They're going to close their eyes, and we're going to do a visualization practice. The translator says to the athletes, please lay on your backs and close your eyes. Half of the girls get up and walk, and they put their backs against the wall and they sit, and the other half are laying there. And I went over to the translator, who's a male, and I said, can you tell me what we think we said versus what we actually said? He said, yes, let me go and understand. So he talks to the athletes whose backs are against the wall. And he said, help me understand why you're sitting here and why you're not out there laying down. They said, we cannot be in the room on our backs with our eyes closed with men who are not our immediate family members. Oh, I mean, that was a cultural thing I wasn't prepared for. So we had to think really quickly, how can we readjust so that they can still participate in the curriculum that we're doing? Visualization, sports performance psychology. I mean, the visualization is for them to climb a mountain, and we want them to participate in that. So we asked them, can you come out on the wrestling mat, and instead of laying on your backs, can you sit, and just sit and close your eyes? And they agreed that they could do that. That would be fair. So we did. We went through this visualization of them climbing the mountain. And as we got to the top, 5 steps, 4 steps, 3 steps, 2, 1. When we got to the top of the mountain, I asked for them to please close your eyes, keep your eyes shut, and repeat after me. I am strong, I am powerful, I am brave, I am courageous, I'm a wrestler. And to watch and bear witness to these athletes who, some of them, it was the very first time that they ever participated in organized sport. It was the very first time that they ever had a female coach or a female instructor help them with sport. And it was the first time that many of them had even done positive affirmations. They didn't know that that was a thing. And to be able to help guide them through some of those first was really inspiring for me, and helps me to recognize that my work has meaning because those athletes have meaning. They're athletes from across the globe. Everyone has value. Everyone has importance. And this is the work that I meant to be doing.
That's so beautiful that you could be the first to be a coach to those girls, and to not only train them in the wrestling room, but do some positive affirmations, something that sounds so basic, but is really important. In addition to sport, there's all sorts of ways to connect across culture. And we talked a little bit about them earlier on in the conversation. Could you share some of your experiences as a sports envoy, perhaps interacting with different cultural aspects outside of sport, such as perhaps dance, food, music?
Yes. When I am traveling, I'm fortunate to recognize what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. My strengths, wrestling, saunas, drinking water, and eating healthy food. My weaknesses are anything to do with the arts. So knowing that, every time I travel, I find one person, whether it's through a recommendation of a friend or a recommendation, I'll ask them for advice, and I'll actually ask them to help me plan, where can I go? What should I see? When I'm in the Middle East and I'm in different parts of the world, rugs are really fabulous, and I don't know enough about them, so I ask for help in helping, how do I even know what to look at? And really what I'm doing is opening up my world and inviting people in so that they can share with me the gifts of what they've been crafting and what they've been developing over their lifespan, and to see things through the eyes of others. So being able to go and look at beautiful rugs and then have someone tell me how you can tell a good rug from a bad rug, being able to go and look at some of the local artists that live, and what do they paint, and how do they choose their mediums, and where does their inspiration come from, traveling around and understanding that the voice of women at various parts of history across the globe, the voices of women have been silenced, at least within the spoken word, and how to recognize and to see those ways that women have come through and fought through, whether it's through singing, whether it's through the written word, through poems. But quite interesting to me was understanding how women have used the art of embroidery to be able to send messages and tell stories of strength and freedom and personal resistance, and more stories like that. But it happens because we have the ability to travel, and maybe we don't have a lot of money. I always preferred traveling fairly inexpensively because I wanted to see the reality of what Earth is and what people do. Because I think that is really connecting with other humans is one of the most beautiful ways to interact on this planet.
That's fantastic. So I want to remind our audience, if you have any questions for Sally, please feel free to start adding them into the chat. As we continue to look to the future of wrestling, Sally, I'm sure the Olympics in 2028 is something that is a big milestone, something that everyone in the community is looking towards. Could you talk about the planning or perhaps the lead up to wrestling for both the men and the women on home turf in LA 28, and what you're expecting to see develop in the sport before that?
Well, what I can share is that the United States is so excited to be hosting the Olympics. Los Angeles is doing the very good and necessary work to be prepared to host the Olympics. There is a tremendous effort to make sure that everything will be done top notch and is warmly prepared to receive all visitors and guests. So we are looking forward to that. Wrestling has a strong roots in Los Angeles. There's an organization, Beat the Streets Los Angeles. I sit on the board for that, and it looks to get athletes off the streets and into wrestling rooms. So there's going to be programming not only at the Olympic level with countries, but there's also going to be programming at the grassroots level to really start to bridge those two worlds together, not just for the athletes to inspire dreams, but for the visitors that are coming in from across the globe to Los Angeles to be able to see how we are looking at sport holistically to really make our kids stronger, healthier, and our communities safer. And I would also say that within the Olympics, there is going to be a great opportunity for us to showcase really the best of what America has to offer, being able to host, as we can see now, like with the World Cup, being able to host games on American soil where not only do people from across the globe get to come to the United States, but it gives just as critically the people that haven't had the ability to leave to go visit other countries, they're coming to us. And it helps to open up our eyes and our apertures in ways that we didn't know that we needed until we met them.
Yeah, it's sort of a crucible of sports diplomacy there.
Yes.
With wrestling hopefully at the center of it. Now, those athletes that are going to make up the U.S. team, are we expecting most of them to come out of the NCAA ranks?
A good question. So with women's wrestling, we are one of the last Olympic sports to determine who their Olympic team will be. And we do that because we want the healthiest, most qualified team going into the Olympic Games. So with that being said, there's only one person per weight class that will compete for Team USA. We don't know where they're going to come from because wrestling is so tricky. Because we are one of the last sports, that means that you have to be on your game and you have to really be prepared for that best 2 out of 3, and then you'll compete at the Olympics within the next month and a half, 2 months. So it's so short. So we'll find out. We've got some strong contenders. We have some athletes like Amit Elor, who is a reigning Olympic champion. She took a year off to have a baby. She'll be coming back to sport. This will be her first World Championships she'll be competing in as a mother. So we've got some great stories coming out about the athletes that are understanding how do they combine motherhood with being an elite athlete, with being a community citizen, with all of those other factors.
Yeah, that's fantastic. To have a mother competing at the top of her game. So let's get to a couple of these questions I see coming in. First one, how has women's wrestling changed in America since you first started competing?
Women's wrestling has changed in America since I first started competing, simply by the growth of the sport. When I first started, I was the only girl wrestling on an all-boys team. It was unusual for me to wrestle against other girls. Now, girls wrestling is one of the fastest growing sports in the United States of America. And there's no signs of it slowing down. There's more momentum that is being added. There's more hype and excitement that is being driven forward. And it has been really beautiful to watch because it's been happening on really twofold. One, it's that, yes, you have organizations like Wrestle Like a Girl that are going in there and increasing access and opportunities. But two, it is our young people who are demanding that they have the opportunity to participate. And you can open the doors, but if no one walks through them, well, that's really tricky. And if people want to walk through doors that aren't open, well, that's tricky too. So it really is that combination of an open door and people need to walk through it.
Mm-hmm. Seeing it and being it, right?
That's right.
So, I want to stay on that just briefly. Was there anything that you learned from other sports that made that same push that you did for women's wrestling? Was there any knowledge exchange between a sport outside of wrestling that helped you ensure that it could be brought to that championship level?
We're always working on collaboration. I think when we talk about the strengths that different leaders bring to the table, women tend to be community-oriented collaborators. How can we do this together? How can we grow together? How can we get to the finish line together? How do we create a family? How do we build an institution that has meaning and merit, value? And so we have had conversations with other sports, whether they were NCAA emerging sports like equestrian, rugby, tumbling. So we have had, triathlon has been really on the forefront of trying to expand its sport offerings. And we're open for any conversations from anyone, especially because everyone has a different way of doing things. There's no one right way. You just have to find the best way for the culture that you're trying to create. And some elements of what we do for wrestling, whether it's at the NCAA level, whether it's at the high school level, whether it's at the global level, it's by looking and seeing is this meeting the needs of the athletes? Is this keeping our athletes safe? Are we generating revenue so that we can make sure that our sport has longevity? And are we being stewards of the revenue that's being generated so that the people who are the game changers, our athletes, the voice of the affected athlete, are they getting treated fairly?
Gotcha. So let's move to this next question here. What values do you think wrestling teaches that are useful in everyday life? Now, there are many that we've covered, but what are, let's say, top 3?
The top 3 values that wrestling teaches you. I'm going to do 3. The first 3 courage, character, confidence. Those are your personal, those are your core values. Those are the things that you're going to take with you, that when you understand it and you embed it, you cannot have that taken away. And it is so powerful. It's so profound. It's for athletics. It's for life. But the second thing, and this is specifically as I think about our young people, the sport of wrestling very specifically teaches our young people, specifically our girls, how to own your space, your voice, and your body in so many ways. Women, girls and women are taught that we're too loud or we need to be perfect. We belong behind the camera or in front of the camera. We're too skinny. We're too fat. We're not wearing enough makeup. We're wearing too much makeup. We shouldn't wear perfume. We're wearing too much perfume. And to go into a place where all that you're being asked to do is being an athlete, and all that stuff that we get told that makes us think we're not good enough. It can go in one ear and out the other. And while you're in that wrestling room, that's where your 2 feet are at. And it allows you to really own your space, your voice, and your body without all that other noise and distraction coming in that's supposed to tell you who you are and that you're not good enough. But if you do this or you do that, then you might be. And it stops that chronic cycling that we do, which is to say, if this, then I might be good enough. Wrestling, it teaches you how to own your space, your voice, your body, and you are good enough.
So staying grounded, even when you're maybe getting flung in the air.
That's right.
Okay. Do you have a favorite match from your career?
I do have a favorite match from my career. My favorite match is actually wrestling one of my Team USA teammates. Her name is Taylor O'Donnell Balker. And we were wrestling at a tournament in Colorado Springs at the Olympic Training Center. And it was one of the few times where I was able to just have fun and relax. And it was a very intense match, certainly. But you could see how much love her and I had for the sport, for each other, for competition, healthy competition. And we continue to both look back fondly on that match because it showed that women and girls, you can be tough and aggressive and you can be friends and you can paint your nails and you can still be mean and you can be too much and you can be not enough. Like, there is no rules. You just are able to go out there and be who you want. So my match against Taylor was fabulous. It just was technically and tactically, it was very intense, and I enjoyed it.
That's great. Now you talked about some of those misconceptions that people might have about wrestlers, but if you could maybe debunk a few ideas that people who are new to the sport might have from seeing it on TV or otherwise.
Yes, one of the biggest areas that we need stronger education in is when people think of wrestling, it's especially across the globe. If they haven't had access to the Olympics, they may have thought WWE was wrestling. And we did do a wrestling clinic where we went in and said, we're here to teach you wrestling. And 2 of the girls said, we already know wrestling. And they stood up and they started clotheslining each other. And I thought, oh, tell me, where did you learn this wrestling? And it was on TV. I said, thank you. That is WWE, and we're here to learn about Olympic wrestling. So that is a tremendous misconception that we have to, it's not even a bad thing. It's just something that we work with. And also the notion that wrestling is this very aggressive sport. There is aggression to it, but it's always controlled. It is more of a martial art instead of this mindless, scattered effort. There's also some challenges that we have with the sport in terms of old culture. People think that wrestling is about not eating enough food and suffering and sweating, and it's not about that. It shouldn't be about that. Wrestling should be about having fun and being able to use your talents and skills to be able to do cool things. And so there is some misconceptions, but we're working through them. And we're continuing to come out the other side a stronger sport with more participants.
I love that comparison that you're giving to WWE. That, frankly, I think that is one of those first impressions that a lot of even in the U.S., a lot of people have of wrestling. So interesting to hear how that's affected the perception before for people before you've coached them. One more here. If someone has never watched a wrestling match before, what should they be paying attention to?
So I think if you've never watched a wrestling match before and you're watching it for the first time, I would look at who is red and who is blue. There's only going to be two colors on the screen. One person's red, one person's blue. And really look at who's trying to control and who's trying to dominate. There's a few different ways that you can do that, but really understanding, like, look at how people's bodies are moving and how people's bodies are flowing. We as humans, we have so much strength, and where your head goes, your body will follow. So being able to understand by watching wrestling and watching where people's heads move and where people's bodies move and how that flows, and understanding, like, who's trying to dominate. If it was a fight, who do you think might be winning? These are all elements that go into the chess match that is wrestling, that is for both boys and girls, men and women. And being able to think on your feet while you're doing that chess match, while your head is moving, while your feet are moving, and getting everything to start working into what is a sports and performance psychologist refer to as flow. That's when you know that you're able to make some brilliant things happen. And that flow state, it happens in sport, but it also happens in business. It also happens when you're in the creative arts. You can be writing a symphony, you can be painting some beautiful canvas, and you can get into a state of flow where everything takes over. You lose your focus, becomes so intense on what you're doing that you lose all noise, and distraction falls away.
Entering that flow state, that's something I'll definitely be looking for myself as well. I think you could see that sometimes, even just, in other sports like soccer, right? All these, you see Messi enter flow state, and you don't have to be a technically proficient soccer player to know what that looks like. So I think that's all the questions we have. One more from me before we sign off. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience in Moscow before we conclude the event here?
I want to say thank you for coming. There's a lot of places and spaces that you could be today, right now. And the fact that you took time to come on to this Zoom to have this conversation with me, I feel quite honored. I love Moscow. I have been there a few times. I prefer it much more in the summers, with the sunshine than I do in the winters. But I also appreciate the winters because that's when you can eat your ice cream outside and it doesn't melt. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being a participant in this conversation. And I look forward to hearing about your successes.
Thank you so much, Sally. So everyone in the audience, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please have a great rest of your evening. We'll have an event on the 20th coming up, sort of a recap of the World Cup and talking about some of the impacts on MLS clubs. We'll have somebody from the Seattle Sounders of the MLS talking to us. So please tune in for that. On behalf of Sally, I'm Josh. Thank you so much for your time. See you next time.